In this next picture, Victor, shown here on the far left, was in Rouen, France during World War I with the 8th Railway Troops of the Canadian Expeditionary Forces rebuilding destroyed railroads. As a sergeant major in his unit, Victor is shown here with officers and other non-commissioned officers. He is pictured in the second row, second from the left. And here is yet another military photo of Vic, who is pictured in the front row's center position. Victor and his family lived in Calgary and then Nanton, Alberta, Canada from 1911 to 1923. Here is a rare view of Vic's first outdoor 2.5-inch gauge railway taken about 1913. Victor had a friend named Walter Melvin who had told him glowing tales of life and opportunity in California. In 1922 they made an inspection trip to California, and here is the car with their belongings tied on the running board. Victor hired on with the Southern Pacific Railroad as a water service helper in 1923. Here we see him at Fairfield, south of Sacramento, seated on the right with a fellow employee on his motor car. As the years went on, Vic continued building trains. Here is an early Fairfield view about 1926 with Vic on the right and his oldest son Ron on the far left, displaying some of their models with a friend. Another early day view of Vic's Fairfield layout in the days before the Great Depression. Here we have another view of Vic seated on the right on his motor car with a fellow employee and their mascot. Vic was also stationed at the historic railroad town of Niles, now part of Fremont, California. This was in the late 20s and under the management of T.F. Rowland's division superintendent. As a water service helper or railroad plumber, Vic would sometimes have to travel and live on an outfit car. Here we see him on the siding at Esparto in the old SP Vacaville branch southwest of Sacramento, relaxing on the porch of his first mobile home. The smaller railroad, however, couldn't be forgotten, and so here is a view of Vic's early day layout that he constructed inside of his outfit car. Here we have another early day view of the outfit car railroad. Note the fire axe hanging on the wall. As 1930 approached, Vic and Maud had 6 very grown-up children. From left to right, working from top to bottom, we have sons Ronald and James and daughters Irene, Mabel, Evelyn, and Elsie. Here is a rare construction photo of Vic's first SP Pacific, the 2422, taken on February 22nd, 1929. Here is another of Vic's early SP engines, a 280 consolidation number 2753. Vic's 2 boys, shown in this next view from left to right, are sons Jim and Ron. They helped their father build the railroad empire. They were both very adept at building car bodies for rolling stock, and Ron was great at installing the block signal systems. In this early day photo of Vic and Ron along with daughter Irene is shown what vocational teachings could be gained by a miniature steam railroad hobby. Here we have an early day photo of Vic's outdoor layout before he moved to Oakland. Here we see the SP 2422 and the 2753 double heading a local freight drag. In 1930 to 31, Vic and his family moved to the Fruitvale district of East Oakland to a large Victorian home located at the corner of 38th Avenue and Foothill Boulevard. The ground floor was actually a 45 by 30-foot basement with 9-foot ceilings, an ideal place for a steam railroad even if it meant sharing space with the furnace, water heater, and laundry tubs. Here is an early view of the roundhouse with water tank and scale 110-foot electrically operated turntable. Another view of the roundhouse with 2 SP Pacifics and 2 282 Mikados shown. Here we have Vic's SP Mikado number 3217 on the turntable. And in this next view, we have the 3217 on the layout's ballast deck trestle bridge, which was jointly constructed by Vic and the late Louis McDermott of 1915 World's Fair fame over a 6-month period. Here we have a close-up view of one of Vic's mics showing his very detailed machine work. All of Vic's engines and cars were built entirely from scratch and not from kits. In this next view of the yard trackage, we show some of the turnouts and also the double slip switch. The yard master in the photo is the late Tim Reardon. Two SP Pacifics double-heading a fast freight as Mr. E.D. Moody, general manager of the Southern Pacific Company, gleefully looks on. Vic frequently entertained SP brass. Here we have the 2422 on the ballast deck trestle. This was a double track trestle, but only a single track arrangement was ever used. Here is a picture of Vic in his workshop, which consisted primarily of a 6-inch Atlas lathe, an Atlas drill press, and many, many hand tools. Here we have a close-up view of Vic machining a drive wheel. In this next series of pictures, we see Vic's workshop activities once again, along with the start of a boiler for a new mic. Here in this next view is Vic's oldest son Ron with an outdoor view of the SP2422 and the 060 switch engine 1207. The switch engine was stolen in April 1946 and has not been seen to this day. Here is the 2422 all steamed up in the firing up track with Vic putting water in the tender. Here we have the 2422 with a local passenger consist. The scenery photo placards that decorated the bare basement walls came from the inside of prototype coaches and sleeping cars from the Southern Pacific. It gave the basement a far better appearance. Here we see the 2422 emerging from tunnel number 1 on the single track line getting ready to cross Mosquito Creek on the steel deck girder bridge. Here is a fine view of Vic's handiwork parked in the yard area near the roundhouse. Here we have the 2422 pulling a 10-car freight at speed. The 2422 is shown here getting ready to back into the roundhouse. In this next view, we have the 3217 shown on the trestle once again. Note the train man on top of the tender. Here we have a freight and a passenger train passing one another under the watchful eyes of, from left to right, the late Walter Brown and the late Frank D. This photo of Vic and the late Al Forst appeared on the cover of Model Railroader magazine for April 1951. Here is another picture of Vic in the roundhouse area. Another view of the roundhouse area is shown with 5 different locomotives in the picture. In this early 1951 view, we have Vic and his grandson Kenny. Here's a picture of the beautiful SP2422. In this early 1960 view of the roundhouse area, we see Vic and grandson Kenny servicing the 2422. Here's another view of Vic and Kenny in 1960 with Vic's 3/4 inch scale, 3.5 inch gauge 24T tank locomotive. Vic and his wife Maud and his SP Mike number 3217 were sent to New York on the Southern Pacific to appear on a program on national radio known as Hobby Lobby. The date was Wednesday, October 19th, 1938. The show was hosted by the late Dave Ellman and was a show devoted to hobbies. The engine was steamed up in the studio and has the distinction of being the only miniature steam locomotive heard all over the country on national radio. Here is a picture of Dave Ellman, who was the host of the show. And here is a picture of Vic with his 3217 mic with the NBC microphone in the photograph. This was back on Madison Avenue, New York City. After the show, the engine was displayed for a time in the window of SP's Fifth Avenue ticket office. All of Vic's locomotives were fired by a special denatured alcohol vaporizing burner of Vic's own personal design. It generates a high number of BTUs of heat, burns clean, is easily controllable like the gas on your kitchen stove by means of a needle valve, and is far superior to the British wick-type system, which can become a real poison gas plant if one isn't careful. This is an excellent burner, and most modelers would surely like to give it a try. Here is a photo we have seen earlier, but this time as it graced the cover of the January 1939 Model Railroader magazine. In this next photo, we have Vic operating one of his locomotives outdoors in the backyard of his 38th Avenue Oakland home. Vic was not always content with operating the trains indoors. He liked to demonstrate that they could actually pull real passengers too, as demonstrated in his backyard. Here is Vic and friends out for a weekend run. The engineer is Vic's youngest daughter, Elsie. Another visitor to Vic's SP lines was this beautiful brass dining car built by the late Harold Collins of Standard Oil Company. Here is engineer Elsie, Vic's daughter, and a local dining car passenger special. In 1930, a group known as the Golden Gate Model Engineers Guild met in San Francisco. Its members consisted of all those interested in model boats, model race cars, model planes, and yes, even model trains. Vic and oldest son Ron, shown in this close-up, were members and were locally referred to as Big Smoke and Little Smoke Shattock because of the live steam railroad hobby. In this next picture, with number 10, shows the late Roland J. Lobaugh, who was best known for the O-scale railroading business and was a member of the Guild. He provided the scale 110-pound brass rail for Vic's Basement Railroad. In 1936, Vic formed a club that broke away from the Guild and called it the Golden Gate Live Steamers. Pictured here from left, we see Frank D., Vic Shattock, Lester Friend from Danvers, Massachusetts, Fred Brash, and Harold Collins. Here we have a group of members admiring each other's locomotives in Vic's basement. Here we have an exhibition of locomotives in Vic's basement. And in this next view, we see one of the many Friday night meetings in Vic's basement meeting room. Vic is shown second from the left. In 1948, a piece of ground was made available in the Oakland Hills and Redwood Regional Park by the board of the East Bay Regional Park District. This was provided so that the live steamers could build an outdoor track where they could demonstrate how the little engines could pull full-size loads to the public. Here is Vic and Walter Brown placing some of the first rails, which were made out of aluminum. The stringers for placing the small cross ties were railroad ties donated by the Southern Pacific Company. The triangular piers that supported the railroad ties were former bridge timbers 21 inches square that were cut, planed, and hauled to the park by SP work gangs on company time. The Southern Pacific Railroad rallied to the requests of Vic Shattock and the Golden Gate Live steamers when it came to providing men and materials for that steam railroad club in the park. Here's an overall view of the club members at work in those early days. In this next view, we see Scotty Gordon of the SP Engineering Department, who was in charge of laying out the complete plans and contour maps for the new layout. At first, the members had been content with only a 60-foot circle of track. Then the circle was broke open and construction started in earnest on the up road. Here is one of Vic's engines on the new 2.5-inch gauge track at Redwood Park. Here's another view of Vic with his engine on the track. And here's another view of Vic with member Tim Reardon to his left. This view shows Vic in his freelance 3/4-inch, 3.5-inch gauge Shattock tank engine. On September 2nd, 1950, the Golden Spike at Redwood Park was jointly driven by Mr. E.D. Moody of the Southern Pacific and John McDonald of the Regional Park District. On that long-awaited day, the opening ribbon was cut by Vic's daughter, Irene Shattock, assisted by Mr. Moody from the Southern Pacific. That first locomotive to parade and review was Jim Keith's 464, driven by his son Sid. The result of all of this celebration was this beautiful multi-gauge track, some 1,450 feet in length. On a couple of rare occasions, Vic Shattock would bring his basement freight train to the park and operate it for the benefit of the public. Here we have a view of Vic and his grandson Kenny on the Shattock tank engine. This photo appeared in the book Casey Jones' Locker by the late Captain Frederick Shaw. And here is a picture of Vic's 3/4 scale, 3.5-inch gauge Pacific 2422 with the actual whistle from the prototype in the background. Public shows were always a plus in demonstrating the hobby to the public. In 1955, a hobby show was sponsored by the Golden Gate Live steamers and held in the ballroom of the old Oakland Auditorium. One of the thrills of this show was giving rides to the public on a portable piece of track as shown here with Vic and Kenny in the foreground. In 1967, Vic made a gift of his beloved 3217 Mike, the Hobby Lobby locomotive, to Mr. A.S. McCann, Western Division Superintendent of the Southern Pacific, in token for all of the kindness shown to him over the years by his employer. In this next view, we see a picture of Vic with his SP 3254, an MK5 class Mikado locomotive, along with member Henry Pass. In the late 60s, Vic started building British locomotives. Left to right here, we see the Lion and the Crampton. The prototype line was used in 1952 in the filming of the Titfield Thunderbolt. Here we see Vic and his lovely wife Vera enjoying a ride at Redwood Park behind Vic's Lion. Vic married Vera a few years after his wife Maud passed away. Vera really enjoyed Vic's hobby, and the two were regulars together at the park for many years. In this view, we see Vic and U.B. Smith on UB's SP Pacific 2414 in 1-inch scale. This British single Stirling locomotive was Vic's last before he died. He never finished it, but it was purchased and completed by member Don Kepfer. Vic retired from the Southern Pacific Railroad in December 1959 after 36 years' service and looked forward to his retirement years of train building. On his retirement, Vic was presented with the sign that hung on the wall in the shop of West Oakland Yard that depicted his responsibilities for all those years by his boss, then Paul Adams. For those many years, Vic was highly respected and admired by his fellow railroaders in all departments on the Southern Pacific. Here's another view of Vic at the far left and his fellow railroad plumbers. At his SP retirement dinner, Vic was presented many gifts, including these necessary toilet bowl items as a sign of his craft. And in this next view, we see a farewell picture of SP brass. Vic's personal close friend, Mr. Julian Watts, is pictured second from the left. Mr. Watts was then General Superintendent of Motive Power for the Southern Pacific System. Being musically inclined, Vic was the director and creator of the SP Water Service Orchestra, with instruments made out of galvanized iron and having kazoos as mouthpieces. This orchestra really made the circuit in the Bay Area and was a hit everywhere it went, as it had acts that were like the old Spike Jones Band. In 1976, more than 2 years after Vic's passing, a new facility for the Golden Gate Live steamers was opened several miles away in Berkeley, taking his turn in this view at tapping the golden spike for that occasion is Vic's grandson, Kenny Shattock. In this next view, we see Ken and Susie Shattock and other club members at the 1975 Oakland Hobby Show at the arena of the Oakland Auditorium. And in this next photo, we see Ken Shattock with Vic's 19th locomotive, a British Crampton, along with an O-gauge SP 484 made by Walter Brown. Now that you have seen the biography of Victor Shattock's life, we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy his beautiful creations with your own eyes. We kindly present the miniature Southern Pacific.